Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right in. Think about the last time you read a scholarly article or listened to an expert give a presentation. You probably focused entirely on the data, right? The charts, the grand conclusions. But what if I told you that beneath those dense paragraphs lies a hidden, incredibly active social world? Today, we're uncovering the secret life of academic discourse. We're going to explore the core mystery of how experts use highly specific linguistic features to literally shape our perception of authority, truth, and even reality itself. Now, you might assume that scholarly articles are just, robotic transfers of data. We typically picture scientists and researchers in white coats typing out these entirely neutral, objective observations. But is academic writing truly just a simple presentation of cold, hard facts? Well, as we look at the data from our sources today, we're going to challenge that assumption immediately. Because it turns out writing in the academy is anything but a mechanical process. This quote from researcher Ken Hyland brilliantly illustrates what's actually happening here. He points out that academic writing has lost its traditional tag as an objective, faceless, and impersonal form of discourse. Instead, it's actually a highly social, persuasive endeavor. When academics write, they aren't just holding up a mirror to nature. They are constantly negotiating social relations. They're actively trying to persuade you, their peers, and the wider world that their findings actually matter. Section 1, The Myth of Cold Facts, Behind the Scenes. Let's take a look at what writers are actually doing behind the text to completely bust this myth. Notice these 4 key pillars. The crucial point here is that academics perform what researchers call a triadic discourse identity. Basically, it's a massive juggling act. Writers use specific discourse resources to negotiate relationships with their readers, establish their own authority, construct a professional identity, and acknowledge alternative views all at the same time. They do this to create solidarity with you, the reader, while simultaneously engaging with a highly critical, diverse scholarly community. Every single word choice is a strategic deployment to position themselves credibly. Section 2, Linguistic Tools, Micro-Level Features. Now that we understand the big picture, let's zoom in on how this identity building is actually possible by exploring some micro-level linguistic features. Take a look at the concept of meta-discursive nouns. These are literally the secret weapons of academic writers. Think of words like procedure, shortcoming, or analysis. When an author uses these nouns, they aren't just naming something, they're building an interpretive frame. By encapsulating complex information into a single noun, like shortcoming, the writer is secretly aligning your thinking with their intentions. They're telling you exactly how you should interpret the previous sentence, subtly guiding your brain to their preferred conclusion without you even realizing it. Section 3, Syntax and Sentence Architecture, Bursting the Myth. Let's look at why this writing can feel so exhausting to read by diving right into syntax. If you ask most people why academic writing is so hard to read, they'll usually say the sentences are just way too long and complicated. But let's compare the two. Everyday conversational speech actually relies heavily on clausal subordination, meaning we chain together lots of embedded dependent clauses when we talk. But academic writing? It relies on dense phrasal embedding. So it's not actually about long, winding sentences. It's about taking a massive amount of complex information and just crushing it down into a single, incredibly dense noun phrase. And that brings us to this absolutely vital takeaway. Academic complexity is about density, not length. Structures like attributive adjectives and prepositional phrases acting as nominal post-modifiers are what actually compress academic prose. So instead of taking 3 sentences to explain a concept, a researcher will compress the whole shebang into a dense block like the generation of concentrations of natural iron materials. It requires way more cognitive effort to unpack, which is exactly why it feels so heavy to read. It's structurally dense, not structurally long. Section 4, Formulaic Patterns, Lexical Bundles. These are the essential building blocks that act as the linguistic glue for scholarly communities. Enter the lexical bundle. These are stable, recurrent strings of words that commonly go together in natural discourse. They are highly specific lexicogrammatical patterns that form a unique lexeme, or specialized lexicon, that researchers use to sound like they belong to a specific academic tribe. And here's a pretty fascinating detail from our sources. Studies show that postgraduate students actually use these formulaic expressions even more frequently than expert academics. Why? Because students are actively trying to display their competence and prove they belong in the club, so they lean heavily on these established lexical patterns. Notice the specific building blocks we're looking at here. We see a massive reliance on morphological patterns and forward formulaic clusters. In fact, our sources note that some forward clusters can occur over 5,000 times per million words in academic prose. We also see frequent use of non-finite clauses ending in ed or ing and coordinated noun phrases. These are the highly specialized linguistic tools experts use to efficiently pack meaning into their research. Section 5. Translating for the digital world. Public audiences. So what happens when these experts leave the pages of a scientific journal and step out into the digital world? Notice how a dense academic abstract is transformed into a punchy post for X. When specialized content is repurposed for social media, all that dense clausal embedding is completely stripped away. Instead, we see the use of non-finite clauses and positive semantic prosody, using evaluative words like improves or protects. The entire goal shifts from packing in dense data to making the research accessible, explicit, and emotionally engaging for an everyday audience. This brings us to a really cool concept coined by scholar Gene Ceccarelli called rhetorical hybrids. Today, scientists are constantly required to cross boundaries. When they give a TED Talk or write a blog post, they're creating a rhetorical hybrid. They have to seamlessly blend the rigorous, objective discourse of science with the accessible, emotional discourse of the public. This boundary-crossing communication fundamentally reshapes the ethos of science in the public eye. Here we have two very different ways to navigate that exact hybrid space. Look at these two experts, Sasha Lucioni and Gary Marcus, both presenting on the dangers of AI. See how differently they perform their expertise. Marcus appeals strongly to institutional authority, maintaining a slightly more formal, technical ethos. He warns the audience about systemic bias using direct, authoritative phrasing. Lucioni, on the other hand, actively invites empathy. She leans right into everyday language, personal anecdotes, and a deeply conversational style to genuinely connect with the crowd. Focus on how Lucioni uses multimodal strategies to build that trust. Look at her embodied resources, her open gestures, her casual shoulder shrugs. Verbally, she drops plain conversational terms, famously referring to an AI-generated image as the dope pope in a white puffer coat. By using these relatable cultural references and relaxed physical gestures, she totally breaks down that traditional, stiff academic wall. She built a bridge of trust with lay audiences by basically signaling, hey, I'm an expert, but I'm also just like you. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen how academic discourse isn't just about data. It's a living, breathing toolkit of syntax, lexical bundles, and meta-discursive framing. But as experts are increasingly forced to become digital communicators, mastering social media algorithms and TED stages, we really have to wonder, as our digital platforms evolve, will the dense, traditional academic voice survive in its current form? Or are we watching the scholarly identity be rewritten entirely in real time? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep an eye out for those lexical bundles the next time you read the news.